Okay, so welcome everybody. We have Bill Reynolds here to do a training on emergency preparedness, so please welcome Bill.
Cross over here, so if I need to use the microphone. I'm going to try to do this without the microphone, so if any of you can't hear me, please let me know right away and I'll get the microphone and I'll stumble over the cord and make myself look foolish. So, well, thank you guys for having me here today. This is a topic that I'm very passionate about, and I'll get into that in a little bit here. What we're going to cover today is basically a little bit about disaster preparedness, including things like what are some of the biggest things we need to be worried about in our area. Obviously, there's certain, being in California, and being a lifelong Californian, what's the biggest thing you guys think about when you think about disasters in California? Earthquakes. We're an earthquake country. But there's also other kinds of disasters we're going to go over today that share a lot of the same preparation concepts and everything, but we want to make sure that you guys have an idea of what to expect in our area. And the way I term this, as you can see on the PowerPoint presentation, is before, during, and after. What can you do ahead of time to help yourself be prepared for these disasters? What you should be doing during the disaster, and then immediately following, what are some of the things you can expect from emergency services? We're going to be pretty busy during that time of year, during that time. It's that time of year, it's the season's greetings. But what you can expect from the fire department during that time, other things that you guys can do to keep yourself safe immediately following after, how to gather information and what you should be doing to not only protect yourselves, but to make our life easier as emergency services. So, as we go through this, I think, normally this is a tough time slot to be in when you're following lunch. Everybody's full and they want to take a nap and I'm putting everybody to sleep. What I really like this to be is an interactive discussion. And so as we go through this, if you have questions or experiences or just need to know more about a topic, please feel free to raise your hand and ask the question. If we don't get to the question by the time we get done here today, I'm going to leave you my contact information and you can get a hold of me that way as well, because the learning doesn't just stop with this talk. It's an ongoing experience. So basically that's what I just already discussed there. What I'm going to try to do is I'm going to try not to do death by PowerPoint. Does everybody know what death by PowerPoint is? Where I sit here and I go, today's goals. I'd like to be able to, have that up there if you guys have the reference to it and everything, but I'd much rather have a conversation talking to you guys at my back to you. A little bit about my department. Humboldt Bay Fire is the product of consolidation between the Humboldt Fire Protection District and the City of Eureka Fire Department. On there it says we've been around since 2011. Actually, both fire departments, the Eureka Fire Department was formed in 1856, I believe, and the Humboldt Fire District was formed in 1929. The Eureka City Fire Department covered the City of Eureka, and just outside the borders of the City of Eureka was the greater Eureka area, encompassing areas like Fields Landing, Freshwater, Humboldt Hill, and that was a completely separate fire department. In 2011, we actually consolidated into one fire department to be more efficient, to share resources, and combine our employees, and to be the department we are today. So right now, Humboldt Bay Fire serves the greater Eureka area out of 5 fire stations, covering the entire City of Eureka and outlying Eureka area. We respond to, and when I made this last year, we had responded to just below 7,000 calls for service a year. This year, we're getting close to 8,000 calls for service. So we're actually increasing our call load quite fast. We're an all-risk fire department, and what that means is that we don't just respond to fires. Nowadays, the fire department is kind of the jack of all trades. We respond to not only all types of fires, we respond to medical emergencies as well. We actually have paramedics on our fire engines that can do the same things that the people in the ambulance can do with IV therapy, with cardiac monitoring, and things like that. We also respond to hazardous materials calls. We respond to all types of rescues. So pretty much anything you can think of, the fire department responds to. We also do what's called community risk reduction. Community risk reduction encompasses fire prevention. It encompasses training like this today with disaster preparedness. It also encompasses basically looking at different hazard groups or threatened groups in our area, the elderly, the homeless, people that are at risk out there that we can focus our training to be able to help out a lot. Every group has different needs, and we try to have training programs that are focused towards each of those to be able to help everybody out. The more people we can help out with a lot of preparation and prevention, the better off we're going to be, and the better off we're all going to be. So a couple of overhead questions for you guys is, how many of you actually have a family or a workplace disaster plan?
Workplace.
All right. Now I understand you guys work in a little bit more dynamic environment, because if I recall correctly, you guys visit patients in their homes. So you're not exactly in an office or a clinical setting where you have a set place where you're going to be working, which is why some of these concepts would be really, really important for you folks to basically have not just an in the workplace plan, but something that's kind of a mobile plan for you. Thinking about having we talk about, a little bit later, we're going to talk about having what's called a 72-hour kit. Something in your home where you can actually be prepared for 72 hours without any outside services. Well, we also, for you guys, we recommend having something like that in your car or your work vehicle, because you obviously aren't going to be in a set place, and your 72-hour kit's not going to do you any good if it's at home and you're at work. So we'll talk about that in a little bit here too. Knowing that the location you're working in. Now again, you guys work in a dynamic environment where you're not always in the same place. Is your client's home in a tsunami zone? Might be nice to know. And if they do, if their home is in a tsunami zone, what are your escape routes? Does your escape route take you through a tsunami zone? And where are your evacuation points? Yes.
So a lot of the time our care coordinators ask those questions. They ask where the flashlights are, where the fire extinguishers are, where the gas shutoff is, so that we know that. And there's a sheet of paper with all of the information in all of our clients' folders.
Excellent.
For us before we go in. And so we might, as a new caregiver, take some time to get acquainted with that, but we always, at least our company has done what they can to help where possible.
That's great. You're really money ahead with that.
And a copy of that's available to the office staff in the computer. So those are all scanned in the computer for each home. And it says the address, where all those different things, shut off, gas shut off, water shut off, flashlights, extra batteries, fire extinguishers, all that type of oxygen, extra oxygen tanks, all that stuff is listed. And if you call the office anytime, night or day, they can go right to the computer, look it up, and tell you where that stuff is. So if the power goes out and you have the ability to use the phone, call us, we'll tell you where to go. Maybe in the kitchen drawer, it could be in the bedroom drawer, it could be in the garage, but we have those locations there. And when the time changes twice a year, it's a good time to check all of your clients' flashlights and batteries and all of that, and recommend that they change their smoke alarms. We do that in our office every time the time changes, and we also change our filters in the heater, so good little tip there.
Absolutely. And that, again, that just, not trying to sound cheesy, that really warms my heart to hear that, because a lot of people are really good about having, they focus on home. I want to make sure my family's safe. I want to make sure my family has a plan. But then they go to work, we say, well, what are you going to do if you're at work? And we get a blank stare, so they're like, I didn't even think of that. So it sounds like you guys are really ahead of the game in that respect. Yes?
And in every single desk in our office, if there is a right-hand drawer, or is close to where there would be a drawer, if there were right-hand, there's a flashlight in all those drawers. So if you're ever in our office and the power goes out, look to see the desk you're near, it has a right-hand drawer, there'll be a flashlight in there. We check the batteries twice a year.
Excellent. So, some here, some of my dirty laundry here. This is something I'm very passionate about, and this is a subject I've taught and worked with for a very long time. And at work as a firefighter, when stuff like this happens, whether it's a large-scale wind event or if it's an earthquake, we have our plans of how we handle things and how we support our operations. But where I was severely lacking was in my home plan. Whereas most people are kind of the opposite. Well, the fire department's very regimented rather. We have policies and procedures and training and how we do things. At home though, I was really easy to focus on myself at home, but at home, I was vastly unprepared for a disaster. My wife, my 3 kids, I didn't have a 72-hour kit. I didn't have extra water. I didn't have a real solid plan. We always kind of thought, yeah, we have a pretty good idea what we're gonna do, but we'll figure it out. What was the big turning point for me in my career was in 2010, I believe it was, we had a large earthquake in Eureka. And I was on call as a fire department duty officer, meaning I was at home with a pager, and anytime there was a large scale event, I would have to respond from home in my fire department vehicle. I was at home, my wife was at the store with our oldest child, and I was at, and my other 2 children were with grandparents at the time. So I was home alone, and the earthquake happened, and scared the heck out of me like everybody else. My first instinct was, though, my pager starts going off, I've got to get to work, I've got to start directing operations for the fire department. I ran out the door without a second thought, and as I was driving down the road, going to the first call I had to go to, I'm thinking, I just left my house unprepared. My wife's gonna come home. I have 3 small children, and they're not ready. They don't have a 72-hour kit. And I could potentially be gone for hours to days, depending on how bad this thing is. So I failed my family in that respect and said, basically, I'm going off to help the citizens of the greater Eureka area. Good luck, guys, which is not appropriate. And so about that time is when I really started getting serious about being prepared at home and wanting to make sure that not only was my family prepared, but they were prepared to exist without me being there to help out for several hours at a time, or for several days potentially. So, but again, we'll get into the disaster prep here stuff in a little bit. Okay. All right. So I think you guys might have the notes on this presentation here. I'm not going to get into defining what a natural disaster is. Obviously, natural disaster is something that's caused by Mother Nature that we have very little control over. We don't have control over the event. What we do have control over is the preparation for the event, which we'll get into in a little bit. Not to be confused with a man-made disaster. A man-made disaster is typically, unfortunately in today's world, something we're seeing, unfortunately, a lot of. Whether it be mass shootings, whether we're seeing attacks or bombings and whatnot. We don't have control over those in the respect of having a lot of chance to prepare for the actual event itself, but we can put systems in place to help protect against those. Man-made disasters are not a topic I'm going to go into a lot today. We're going to focus on the natural disasters and the preparation for those. But a lot of these same concepts can be extrapolated to those, to man-made disasters as well. So we already mentioned earthquakes, but I'm going to go over a couple different types of disasters too that are potentially prevalent on the North Coast. Some you may look at and go, it's pretty green around here, and I look outside and I think, the fire danger today probably isn't that high. And you'd be right, for wildfires and everything, today is probably not the day that we're going to see a big conflagration in our area. But during the summer months, it does warm up a little bit. Eureka tends to stay pretty moist, but we do have different microclimates around our area. And during the summer, if you got to the end of Freshwater Road, you could have mid-80s to low 90s at that point where you're at. So it can be very warm and dry things out. We're also surrounded by a lot of areas that are a lot warmer that can have potentially large fires as well. And I may be assuming incorrectly, but I'm assuming all of you don't work always in Eureka. You guys are in and about the county in different places. So this is where that would really apply to you for some of the stuff we're going to talk about. But the 4 things we're going to cover in a little bit of detail today are earthquakes, tsunamis, windstorms, and fires. Okay? Keep in mind, these are not the only things you can experience around here, but these are the 4 big ones. Okay. So, yes?
What is in place for Humboldt County to avoid, like, gridlock traffic? For example, in the university, Eureka is pretty landlocked by bridges. The only way in and out of Eureka is through bridges.
Right.
So, what's in place to counteract that, especially during tsunami?
Well, with tsunamis, we have the inundation zones that are pre-planned out. We obviously know where the run-up zones are going to be, depending on the size of the event, which is obviously something we can't really predict. But with those run-up zones, we can basically dictate what the evacuation plan is for as far as where we direct people, where the police department's going to direct people, what areas are going to get people out of, and evacuation zones. And then they have pre-designated evacuation sites around town. One example would be the Road Acres Fairgrounds. Basically large areas where people can come to and basically be safe at until they get organized as far as shelter and through the Red Cross and things like that. So tsunamis we actually have planned out pretty well. The $1 million question, like you mentioned about with earthquakes and being landlocked by bridges, that's a really good question. And I don't know that the county is very well prepared for a plan like that. We obviously, if there is a large earthquake, the bridges are probably going to be shut down by CHP and Caltrans until they can be inspected and make sure they're not going to fall down. Because as a lot of you that might be lifelong residents know, back in 1980 we had a very large earthquake, and it actually collapsed the overpass down by CR. So again, I know they're working on it. I know there's a lot of people through the County Department of Emergency Services that are trying to get the plan better together. Where the problem comes in is once you get this great plan put together, and it's this nice binder that has a great plan on it, somebody puts it on a shelf someplace, it usually stays on a shelf until they really need it. There's not a lot of training on it. So the big focus over the next few years, I think, is going to be not only updating the plans for that and basically coming up with the answers to those good questions, but it's also going to be how can we practice this without raising a mass panic. So the practice is the key. Yes?
So what are the designated evacuation locations other than Redwood Acres?
I don't have that list memorized. What I can do is,
Is it on a website?
there should be on the county's website, through the Office of Emergency Services, which is the division of the Sheriff's Department. And the other thing we'll talk about as we go through this is how you get that information during a disaster, whether it be via social media, via radio, or other types of media. We'll have different ways you can check for that. So, good questions. And one other thing to mention here, which I'm already demonstrating, I'm not going to pretend that I have the answer to every question. And if I don't have the answer, I'm not going to lie to you. I'm going to tell you, you know what? It's a great question. I don't know. And we're going to I'll figure it out. And I'll either give you a question by the time I leave, or I'll have it for you shortly after.
One of the
Yes.
new things we'll be doing pretty soon, we're gonna change the activities that are available in the scheduling software that you can pull up on your phone. And in there, it will list what that client's evacuation plans are. If they have to leave their home, where will they go? Is their first choice their daughter's house? Well, where is that? Is their second choice the local shelter? Where is that? So we'll be able to pull that information up on the site to find out the nearest shelter. And then we'll include that in that information so you guys can have that available. It'll also be printed out in the folders. It'll be a couple more months before we start to institute the new activities. And once we do, it'll take a while to get all of the clients updated because we have several hundred clients. So it'll take a while, but eventually you'll see that information in the folders.
Excellent. You guys are prepared. I like this.
Need a secretary to write down all the questions. You need to refer to them.
Well, I'm actually kind of excited about recording it too, because I can go back and refer to a lot of that too. So that's actually a great way to do it. So anyways, like I said before, if you live in California for any length of time, you've experienced an earthquake, both big and small. We obviously, some of them are obviously small enough we don't even feel them. You know, we had the most recent earthquake we had. I thought it was my dog at the end of my bed walking around. It was like, oh, we had an earthquake last night. I didn't even notice. To the ones that we have that cause damage, knock things off the shelves, or even worse, obviously. It's been a while since we've had one, and you always hear people talk about, you know, at least I have my grandmother who's just turned 100 years old. She always says, it's earthquake weather. There's an earthquake coming, I can feel it. Most of the time it doesn't happen, but I think one time during her life she said that, and it might have happened, so she still uses that to this day. But, let's see here. So, a couple of them, and I mentioned this one earlier, a couple of the biggest earthquakes we've had in the history of our area was the Gorda Basin earthquake. That was the one that occurred in 1980. It was a 7.3 on the Richter scale. I do too. I was 5 years old, but I remember that one distinctly. And that was the one that knocked down the overpass near College of the Redwoods. And interestingly enough, I'm a second generation firefighter. My dad was a firefighter before me. In our community. And remember I talked about with my family running out the door and not being there when they got home? I remember being at home as a 5-year-old and my dad saying, everybody's okay, I've got to go to work. And I didn't see him for a couple days after that because that's just the way that it was. We had to go help people. So, and then a little bit more recently were the 1992 earthquakes. It was actually a series of 3 earthquakes, and I see a lot more people shaking their heads on that one. Actually, initially when we had that earthquake, a lot of people thought it was an earthquake with 2 big aftershocks. It was actually 3 distinctly different earthquakes that occurred that caused pretty widespread damage throughout our area. Burned down shopping centers, collapsed buildings, a lot of different damage happened there. So, before the earthquake happens, okay, you don't want to be trying to prepare for something as the event is unfolding, obviously, because if you're not prepared ahead of time, trying to gather your supplies and stuff, it's kind of a moot point at that point. So ahead of time, assemble your 72-hour kit. And I alluded to this a little bit earlier, but why do we call it a 72-hour kit? I'm going to ask these guys this several times as we go through here. Why do we call it a 72-hour kit?
You got to tell on it have to last.
Yes. Why do we use 72 hours as the barometer for where we put our kit together for 72 hours?
Might take that long before everything gets turned back on.
Absolutely. That's very close to the right answer, the 100% right answer. It might take that long before power comes back. It might take that long before stores are open again. It might be that long before emergency services can get to you. Depending on how bad the event is, we're going to be spread pretty thin, as is law enforcement, as is the hospital services. So you need to be prepared to be self-sufficient for at least 72 hours. Hopefully it doesn't take that long. Worst case scenario, that should be able to support yourself for 72 hours. Ahead of time, look for potential hazards around your workplace and at your home. You know, do you have bookshelves that are, you know, loose, off balance? Do you have things on your walls? Do you have power lines outside your house that might fall down in the event of an emergency, or an earthquake rather? Obviously, we talked about having a family plan. Now, a family plan doesn't just include, you know, we're all at home and the earthquake happens. What if the kids are at school? What's the plan? What's the school's plan? If you're at work, what are you going to do with your animals? How many of you have pets out there? I've got 2 dogs at home. I think I love more than my children. Just kidding. I'm kidding. That joke usually doesn't get, half the crowd usually laughs, half the crowd goes, he's awful. That's just terrible. And I don't mean that. I love my children very much. You know, well, my daughter at the university right now better think that because we're paying a lot of money for her to be there. Now, this is kind of one for you guys. You probably are way ahead on, but see about taking specialized training for first aid, CPR. You know, learn how to secure the utilities in your house. How many people here can turn off the power to their house and turn off the gas at their house? Okay. Yeah, absolutely. If you don't know how to do it, get a hold of PG&E, get a hold of the fire department. We can come out there and show you how to do that in the event of emergency. Just because the last thing you want to do is have to go out and try to figure it out when the earth is shaking. Yes.
So right now I think PG&E is a little bit paranoid, so if you have any problems going on in your house, they're there within less than an hour.
Okay.
I had my lights were fluttering on and off, and then since the fire, I mean, it's been going on for years, but since the fire is a little paranoid, I don't want my house to be the cause of my neighborhood burning down, and power is actually shutting off and then coming back on. So I called them, and it was somebody in Santa Rosa that answered the phone, and there was somebody at my door in 40 minutes.
Great. Yeah.
So, and there was something wrong on the power line.
Okay.
So don't be afraid to call them.
Yeah, absolutely. You know,
Also, that they have automatic earthquake shut-off valves you can have installed.
yeah, a lot of houses and businesses now have those. I know, like my residence is old enough that it still doesn't have one of those, but most new construction, they actually have, like she mentioned, an automatic valve, but if the earth starts to shake, it actually activates a mechanism that actually shuts off your gas automatically, which is fantastic. So
would you say in any earthquake, that's maybe one of the first things you would do is go and turn off the power and the gas?
I wouldn't say in any earthquake. If it's a major earthquake where you have any, or even after a minor earthquake, if you start to smell of natural gas, or if you have any doubt, if you're in doubt, turn it off. You can call the fire department or call PG&E, and we'll respond. Obviously, we're not responding to other calls that are more emergent, and we'll come out and we'll be able to evaluate and see if it's safe for you to turn it back on.
If you turn the gas off, you're not allowed to turn it back on until PG&E comes and says it's okay. So they say to only turn it off if you smell gas.
Yeah, so again, but if you have any doubt at all, be safe, turn it off. It may take a little while, but then that's when the 72-hour kit comes in. You may be waiting a day or so to be able to turn it back on, especially if PG&E is inundated with calls. But it's better that than what the alternative could potentially be. How many of you around here have heard of what's called CERT, Community Emergency Response Teams? Great. CERT's a relatively new concept, and it's basically, these are citizens who've been trained to basically kind of help us out during emergencies. They basically can do things that, while we're tied up doing things like fighting fires, conducting rescues, they can do things like basic first aid in neighborhoods. And typically a CERT team is neighborhood based, and they're trained in light search and rescue. They're not going to be digging into piles of rubble or anything like that, but they can go around and look and try to help people shut off utilities. They can help get people out of very minor situations, but they can do traffic control. They do a lot of things that we would normally have to allocate personnel to, but in a situation like this, in an emergency situation or a disaster situation, they can really come and help kind of be, people out there in the field that are helping us out. Now in your work setting, obviously, if you're working with a client, you're in their home, being part of the CERT team may not be, something that's easy for you to do, but in your own home community, check, don't let them run through the fire department, check with your local fire department and see if they have that capability if that's something you're interested in, because the CERT volunteers are a huge resource to us. Okay, during the earthquake, how many people remember from elementary school the old duck cover and hold drills? That's still a concept that still applies, obviously. During the earthquake, when the earth starts to shake, obviously you're going to want to duck cover and hold where you're at. Obviously, if you can get under a piece of furniture that's sturdy, that's a good place to be, because the biggest thing for that is people always say, is a desk really going to help me protect me from my roof falling in? Well, if the whole house collapses, you've got other problems, and I'm not trying to make light of that. But what it's really designed to do is basically if you're underneath of a desk and there's books falling off your bookshelf, there's pictures falling off the wall, maybe some ceiling tiles fall in, that'll help protect you from that as well. Okay? If you're in bed, if it's the middle of the night, it's pitch black, probably the best thing you can do is basically cover your face and neck with a pillow and write it out in bed. If you're inside, stay there till the shaking stops and then evaluate. You're going to have your head on a swivel. You're going to be looking around for damage to your house. You're going to be looking around for broken glass, anything that might potentially injure you if you need to get out of the house. If you make the decision to leave your house, whether the house is badly damaged or you just want to go outside and evaluate the outside, some of the hazards you're going to be looking for on the outside. When the earth stops shaking, did we have power lines fall down outside? How many of you out there know the difference between a power line, a phone line, and a cable line? I'm glad to see one hand go up, but the point of that is if you're not sure if that line down is cable, phone, or a power line, don't touch it. Stay away from it. Call 911 and say, I've got a power line down in front of my house, and we need to have PG&E or the fire department respond. If we respond, we can actually identify if it's a power line or not, and we'll do what's called isolate and deny entry. We'll keep people away from it. But the real people that are going to be able to handle that are going to be PG&E. They're going to come out and they're going to shut the power down and be able to take care of restringing it and whatnot. So the point is if you're not sure if it's what kind of line it is, don't touch it. Yes?
Can you tell us which line is which?
Typically, and this is a pretty gross rule of thumb,
Okay.
the power lines are the ones that, what's that? They're thick and they're going to be up on the higher wires on the telephone poles. Typically, phone line and cable lines are down lower, and typically the power line from a house will drop down into a weatherhead, and that drops down into an electrical box. Whereas with the other lines, they don't do that. They basically go into the house via other means. So it's kind of hard. I don't have a good visual for you, but I can take you outside and show you what that looks like. But typically they're the lines that are a little higher up. The other dead giveaway, and I joke, but this is the truth. A lot of times if it's a big power line down, you will see it actually arcing and sparking and jumping around on the ground. But don't always bank on that to identify it for you. Yes?
As part of safety awareness and for public and stuff, PG&E came out with several videos on YouTube that it showed a man driving in his car when he was talking on Bluetooth to his wife and how he ran into a power line because of another careless driver, and how he was able to evacuate his car safely with down power lines surrounding his car, and how to move and how to get around that safely without electrocuting himself.
Okay.
There's a lot of other videos similar to that for emergency situations that kind of help you identify as well as part of a public safety health awareness sort of thing.
Okay. And those are good resources to have and look at. My recommendation if you were in a vehicle where the power line came down on it would be obviously just to stop the vehicle, stay put and call for help. A lot of times, there are techniques you can use to get out of a situation like that, but depending on your physical capability and depending on, where the line's at and everything, most people carry a cell phone nowadays. I personally say all people carry a cell phone. Call for help and just basically stay put and wait for PG&E to get there to be able to take care of it.
That's what was also mentioned in the video.
Good.
And his car started to catch fire. So
Okay.
if you can't move, if you have to move,
Right.
it was really specific.
Okay.
They worked with first responders on that.
Right.
It was really cool.
Yeah, no, that sounds like a great resource. I'll have to check that out. I've not seen that series of videos, but that sounds great. So, other things to keep in mind when you're in these situations is, the power might go out. You might be in a building where there's fire alarms and sprinkler systems. One thing to keep in mind, and in a kind of a wives' tale that Hollywood's kind of perpetuated the myth, is when the fire alarm in the building goes off, the sprinkler automatically starts flowing, so it's connected to the fire alarm. That's not the case. Sprinkler systems are typically heat activated, or they have to have a manual pull someplace, like in a large factory setting, where that you can pull it and activate the deluge system. But most of the time, the thing that's going to set off a sprinkler system is either physical damage in the system, i.e. something that happens in an earthquake, or they have what's called a fusible link or a bulb inside that. It gets to a certain degree of temperature, then it'll burst and set the sprinkler system off. And when a sprinkler system goes off, every sprinkler head doesn't activate and drown the whole building. Only the specific sprinkler head that is activated over a fire or a waste can or something like that will go off. So just because you hear the fire alarm going off doesn't mean you have a sprinkler system going off and dousing you. But keep in mind, we're talking about earthquakes here. In an earthquake, there may be physical damage to the system that does basically make the water leak and start to spray. So be aware of that as well. It can create a lot of chaos and confusion. Okay. And then lastly, if your house, I know in my neighborhood there's a couple of houses that in my subdivision are up against a hillside. I would be worried that in an earthquake, especially after it's been raining and whatnot, loosened trees, loosened rocks, things that can come down the hill, potential for mudslides. So stuff to keep in mind during the actual event. What about after? Okay, are there going to be aftershocks after an earthquake? Absolutely. Are they all going to be as big as the initial earthquake? Maybe. Usually they're quite a bit smaller. But as we found out in 1992, what we thought were actual aftershocks were additional earthquakes. So be aware of that. First things first, after you basically have come out of your duct cover and hole, and after the ground stops shaking, is to do a self-assessment. Am I injured? Am I okay? Am I able to function and get out of here if I need to? You know yourself better than anybody. If you have some bumps and bruises but can still go, then you're okay. If you need help, call for help. If the building you're in is damaged, try to figure out a way to get out of it safely. I love when we first started here today that the people putting on the class, putting us all together today, identify the emergency exits. That's fantastic. Know your exits. Whenever I go to a hotel, if I'm staying someplace out of town, call me crazy, call me paranoid. I call being a firefighter for 25 years. I always identify where the exits are and I know how to get out of the building. I also try to never stay above the first floor, but that's just me. Not afraid of heights, I just don't want to have to get rescued by a ladder. If you're trapped in a building and there's dust around, find something to cover your mouth. Use your cell phone to call for help if you're trapped. If there's stuff nearby that you can bang on, if your 72-hour kit or on you, you have some sort of a whistle or some sort of signaling device, use that to basically delineate that you need help. If you're in an area that may experience tsunamis, know your area-wide tsunami plan, know your evacuation routes, know where the evacuation zones are for the tsunamis, for tsunami safety zones. How many of you have seen around our community the little tsunami sign saying you're now entering a tsunami zone? And in a lot of areas that actually have, that are in tsunami zones, they'll actually have pre-designated and signed evacuation routes for you to take and to a safe assembly area to be able to be out of the tsunami danger. Saving phone calls for emergencies. One thing that we found after the big events we've had around here is what's everybody immediately going to do on their cell phone and on their home phone? If you still have a home phone, I know a lot of people don't have those anymore. They're calling to check on family. And the system gets jammed up, they're not able to field all these phone calls, and you get a busy signal, or you can't get through, or your call gets dropped. Excuse me. One thing, a piece of trivia though, one thing that does work relatively well during a disaster, provided that the towers have been knocked down, is text messaging. Text messages tend to get through pretty darn easy compared to phone calls. A little piece of advice there. Pardon me for the coffee here. A lot of talking. So, yes?
The safety corridor is in a tsunami zone.
It is.
And it's also got trees on each side, so if you're pulling over, it says to stop your vehicle and away from trees. Well, the roads up here, you can't get away from the trees.
Right.
So, and also, where do you head when you're in that corridor, if you can get it with all the vehicles too?
That's a really good question. You know, the general recommendation is to try to get away from trees and everything like that. You know, if you can. Obviously, you don't want to be driving during the earthquake itself. So if you have to temporarily pull over someplace to basically ride out the earthquake, do whatever you can to make it safe, where you can pull over safely, ride it out, and then head inland. You know, if you're on the safety corridor, try to get towards the old Arcata Road, if you can cut across. But basically try to get as far away from the ocean as you can, obviously, and in the Bay Area. Typically, you'll have a little bit of lag time before a tsunami were to happen. How much lag time there's going to be, that's really up to Mother Nature. But as quickly as you can, obviously, and safely, obviously keeping in mind down power lines and trees, just drive away from the bay, and a little ways in, you're actually going to be out of the inundation zone. I think it's probably less than a quarter mile, basically, to the south of the ocean there. So, yes, sir.
I don't think we can get too far sometimes on a car because trees fall over the roads, there's traffic jams, or just a lot of traffic. So if you can walk, I think that'd be a good thing.
Yeah, and a lot of different companies that we work with around town, the county of Humboldt and whatnot, they actually have not only vehicle evacuation plans, but they also have walking routes that they want their employees to take as well, pre-designated. So, and they pre-designate those, obviously keeping in mind that your evacuation zone, your evacuation route rather, may have hazards in the way that keep you from being able to take that route, so they have alternate routes picked out as well. But they also want to pre-designate those as best they can, because that way, if they're out looking for employees who may have gotten lost, they have a pretty good idea of what the areas they're going to be in. So knowing which ways to get out with walking as well is a pretty good way to be. So. The other thing that I mentioned earlier is how we get information during these events. Obviously, you have radio, TV, if you have power, if the stations are on the air. One of the most reliable ways and one of the best ways that we get information these days, as much as a lot of people hate the Facebook and things like that, social media is actually a really powerful tool in getting information out there. In, I think it was when we had the Japanese earthquake that caused a tsunami, and we actually had a tsunami warning and watch in our area. One of the most reliable ways for us to get information out to the people in our area was via social media, via Twitter posts, via Facebook, because a lot more people are in tune with that, and while their power may be out, they still have access to their phones, and they can still get information that way, and people are actually sharing information. The only problem with social media, and this is the caution that I always use, is not all of that information is vetted. So you may have somebody saying that, oh my gosh, the King Salmon area is utterly decimated, and you are in King Salmon, you look out your window and you go, I don't know what they're talking about, but things are fine here. So be aware that, if you have friends and other private citizens that are giving out information via social media, it may not always be the most reliable. So don't take that as the be-all, end-all. Seek good information from the fire department, Office of Emergency Services, law enforcement. So, okay. So leading into tsunamis. Obviously, tsunamis and tidal waves, obviously, there's an event someplace that happens that stirs up Mother Nature, and we get what's called a seismic sea wave, or a series of waves that come in and can potentially do damage. Notable tsunamis include the 2011 earthquake that happened in Japan. How many of you have seen the video footage of the tsunami in Japan? Absolutely one of the most dramatic things I've ever seen. It terrified me to think that could happen, but obviously, that's a real thing. That the earthquake in Japan was one of the largest ever recorded at 9.1. It was utterly devastating to the Japanese. But that tsunami was the thing that I looked at and just said, "Holy cow!" Many of you, though, that live in our area know that way back in the early 1960s, 1964, the city of Crescent City, north of us, actually had a tsunami that caused quite a lot of damage and some deaths as well.
I think there was one way sooner than that too that wiped out their whole pier.
Yeah, and the one actually, actually that was the same one from the 2011 earthquake from the Japanese tidal wave or tsunami.
Yeah, when the boat washed up.
Yeah, they actually, that was the one that actually caused a lot of damage to their pier, sunk some boats in their harbor, and it was, as bad as, you know, we thought we were gonna get it here, they got it a lot worse. And it's just, it's hard to see, it's just basically an old newspaper clipping from the actual tsunami that happened in Crescent City. So again, before a tsunami, recognizing that you're in a tsunami zone. We talked about that. The county's been very good about basically posting signs and letting people know that they're in what's called the inundation zone. An inundation zone is just basically the fancy term that says, if there's a tsunami, it's probably going to affect you. Okay? Know where your evacuation routes are and where the high ground is. I took part in a drill a few years ago in King Salmon, just as a drill monitor. They actually had a simulated tsunami. The problem they had was they had a great evacuation plan. The people in the community knew their plan really well, but their evacuation zone was up a very long, windy, muddy hill. And it was, I think when they made the plan, it was the people that were doing it didn't take into account the weather in Humboldt County, and they also didn't take into account that, you know, for most of us in the room, walking up a hill is not that big of a deal, but you have people that are in wheelchairs or have disabilities. May not be the best way to do it. So they've been working to basically try to figure out what they can do to help people like that in their situation. Because maybe their high ground area they picked wasn't the best location for them to do. So, and that's where practicing your plan comes into effect and making sure that you're not practicing on the night of the event. And again, gonna reiterate this one lots of times, have an emergency kit with a household and a workplace work plan. Okay, during the tsunami, if you need to evacuate, if you're in the tsunami zone, you know, make sure that your emergency kit is portable. So those of you that have a 72-hour kit at home, how many of your kits are portable that you can just pick up and you can go? Fantastic. Air more of my dirty laundry here. So when I decided after that earthquake to put my family's kit together, I got a bin from Costco, and I stocked it. We had water for everybody. We had stuff for our pets, and I went to lift it up, and it was like, holy crap! I just threw my back out. You know, so making sure that this is something that you can actually manage, and you know, now that's not to say that you can't have a bigger cache of supplies in your garage or you decide to keep it, but trying to have something that's portable that you can basically throw in a backpack, throw in a duffel bag, something you can throw in the trunk of your car is important. Yes?
My aunt has a 6-month food storage, but on top of that, she keeps all of her 72-hour kits in red backpacks that look something similar that you get from the Red Cross almost.
Okay.
And they're all labeled with everyone's name of the household, and it has the 72-hour kit supplies. And
She should do a class.
so that's what she has, and they're all on these little hooks right there. And she has a couple of them placed in the house. So if one exit is blocked, there's another set of them by another exit. It's not just in one spot.
Fantastic.
And when she had the kids when they were younger, she kept their immunization records and their identification up to date in like folders inside the backpacks.
Great.
You know, all of their allergy and medication information is all in this sheet in there. She periodically, every month, would make sure it's all good.
Outstanding. Yeah, she's got her stuff together. I'm jealous. Yes.
I keep a backpack in my car, and then I have an additional tub with extra things like a big rope if we have to pull a piece of, hook onto the car and pull a piece of building off of something. Gloves. Also in there, I've got like blankets and things like that that I've used numerous times for auto accidents. And then outside my bedroom door is another backpack, and then I have an emergency kit in the backyard in the bushes. With a big chunk of water like this, and it hasn't been done for years.
That's awesome.
A little out of date.
Yeah, I love hearing people are prepared. That makes me happy. That makes my job easier.
And we usually keep some supplies at the office too, and we've had people during some of the earthquakes want to evacuate to our office, and so that's always a possibility. I used to have a big storage of blankets and a big storage of water, but we don't currently have those anymore.
Okay. So,
So one quick question
You bet.
I've got 6 kids at home, so
Okay.
would you suggest having small backpacks for them to to just grab, okay guys, we're, heading out, grab your bag?
I would
Or-
actually.
You would, okay.
Yeah, just because one, it makes it easier on you, and if you're managing 6 children,
Right.
and maybe if you have pets or anything like that. And plus, the other thing is, it gives them a focus.
Right.
So if they're scared, like my kids would have been, I think they'd still be pretty scared, but especially if they're little, you let them know that this is your bag, this is really important, you're gonna help us out, by carrying this bag, and that gives them a good focus too. Plus, the other thing is you can spread the load out. If you're carrying most of the other stuff, if they have personal comfort items as well that they want to have in there, that's a big advantage as well. So.
Okay, all right, great. Good story.
So, obviously knowing your escape routes, knowing where the high ground is. Never go to the shore to watch the tsunami. Please. And it's really sad that I have to say that, but after the one we had in 2011 from the earthquake in Japan that caused a big tsunami there and caused a tsunami warning here, I saw, and I kid you not, people on social media, close personal friends of mine saying, "Going to the beach to watch the tsunami." Like, you're an idiot. Don't do that. So, because you don't know when it's going to hit, and when you see the water basically coming, it's already too late. Yes.
When I was in the military, I lived in Japan, and my barracks were right on the waterfront, and we had a typhoon, and we were right by the boat, the yacht club, and so we got to watch the yachts sink. And a couple of my friends did go outside. I'm not going.
Yeah.
But
Don't.
we were right there on the shoreline.
Yeah, that's a little unnerving. And then lastly on that is basically obviously listening for information. Radio, social media, TV if you still have power, to get good information and make sure the information is vetted. After the tsunami, continue seeking information. Obviously be aware that there may be more than one wave. Mentioned in there that with the Crescent City tidal wave, ended up being multiple waves that came in. Check yourself for injuries and first aid. Obviously do your self-assessment. Am I okay? What do I need to do to help myself? Again, don't go sightseeing. I say that multiple times, but it needs to be said. And when reentering homes and buildings, use extreme caution as floodwaters may have damaged buildings. How many of you have seen the videos that are out there of how much power is behind water? Not just river water, but waves, absolutely. The water is nothing to mess with. When it's angry and moving fast, it will take you down and take you out. Okay, windstorms. We'll go pretty quickly through this one. Seasonally around here in Humboldt County, we get, the occasional windstorm where obviously, usually coupled with rain and whatnot, but is there always rain associated with windstorm? Not always. The big thing to worry about with rain is if you have a large windstorm come in on the heels of a large rainstorm, what's that do to the root systems and trees and things like that? It makes the ground soft. Things tend to typically fall easier. We have to worry about mudslides and things like that.
In 2006, wasn't there a huge windstorm in Sequoia Park?
There was, I remember 2006, I was on duty as a fire captain at one of our stations, and it was a large enough windstorm that, funny story, I won't tell too many stories here, but yeah, on the weekends our fire crews were able to go out to breakfast at local restaurants, and we were at breakfast, I was at breakfast with my engine company, and the windstorm just kind of came out of nowhere and hit really hard, and winds just started blowing, and it was raining cats and dogs, and it was horrible. So we got up and we left, we paid for our food, we're like, we gotta go. My firefighter, a guy who's now a captain, on our crews we have a captain, an engineer, and a firefighter. The captain's a supervisor, engineer drives the fire engine, and the firefighter is the one who goes inside with the captain with the firefighter. So we got outside and started to put our gear on, and my firefighter, a man named Michael Landry, who's now a fire captain with us, went to put his turnout coat on, his fire coat, and a gust of wind came up and blew him down the side of the fire engine and knocked him down. It was that rough of a windstorm. And that's one of the biggest things I remember about that was I almost lost my firefighter. He almost sailed off like a kite. But that was the last, and that's the windstorm I was thinking of when I put this together, because we had large swaths of trees in Sequoia Park taken down. We had, a lot of damage to power lines.
Went over on the bridge.
Yeah.
Not over the bridge,
But tipped over on it. It was pretty dramatic. So before a windstorm, obviously the same preparation things as before. Having your 72-hour kit available if you need it. Do pre-planning around your house? Do you have large trees that potentially have, limb hazards and whatnot? Do you live beneath power lines? Do you have power lines in your area? Some places are lucky enough to have underground service for power lines. In Humboldt County, we don't have that so much. Obviously, if you have a deck or a patio, making sure that you have lawn furniture that's not going to be flying around out there if something were, wind were to catch it. And if you know there's a windstorm coming, if we have a prediction, some people believe the weatherman, some people don't. If there's any indication if a large system is coming in, try to limit your driving if you can. Obviously, so you're not driving around and having trees fall on you. During a windstorm, if you have, obviously staying away from windows and whatnot that might be broken out. If you're advised by officials to evacuate, do so. We always hear the stories of places where people are advised to evacuate and they don't do it, and then later they get themselves into a bad way, and then who has to come get them out? We do. So if you're advised to evacuate by the officials, please do so. It makes everybody's life a lot easier. If you're in a car, try to stop the car away from power lines and trees, and or anything that might fall on you, and avoid the base of steep or unstable slopes because lower areas are prone to flooding and mudslides and things like that. And obviously, don't depend on electricity and be prepared to lose it. So, I'm trying to go a little bit faster because I think I'm going a little bit over time here. So I'm not. Yeah, I know you guys all want to eat too. After the windstorm, if you need to go outside, again, just like with earthquakes, be prepared for power lines that are down and other hazards. Limbs hanging off of trees, damaged pieces of the structure, lawn furniture that might got blown around. I mean, just even a simple trip hazard like that got blown in your way can cause injuries. Obviously, if you see hazards such as down power lines, if you smell gas, anything like that, call 911 or call the utility company to come out and fix it. The reason we mentioned, to call in the case of a life-threatening emergency is if your power's out, if you try to call PG&E and say, when's my power going to come back on? Is that really the type of call they should be fielding right then and there? Not really. I mean, if it's been a couple hours, it might be okay to call, but right immediately following a windstorm or an event where you've lost your power, give them a little bit of time to have some reflex and react. If an all clear is given and the storm has passed, assess your home, business for damage, see if there's anything that you need to take care of. Monitor news and look for information, because just because the storm has passed doesn't mean you're not just in the eye of the storm and something else could be coming up. All right, last topic is fires. Keep in mind that some of this information in my presentation is out of date given recent events, and I'll talk about that a little bit. Humboldt County has areas around it, obviously the Willow Creek area, areas where there's a lot higher temperature and the climate's a little more dry, where the fire danger is a little bit more than say in Eureka. But anytime we have vegetation out there for large vegetation fires, that's all fuel, it's all potential. Today, not such a big danger. During the summer months, when things dry out for a few months, it can be a little more of a hazard. An example of that is in 2017, when I made this presentation, we had just experienced a very large vegetation fire in Blue Lake that threatened the town of Blue Lake. Local fire resources were able to get there. They were able to get a handle on it very quickly. Later that night is when what was called the Tubbs Fire happened. The Tubbs Fire is the fire that decimated the city of Santa Rosa on its north end. Many of you that have driven through there have still seen that they're still recovering from that. At the time of the Tubbs Fire was the most damaging fire, the most devastating fire in California's history. Unfortunately, that has since been surpassed by, as many of you have heard about, what's called the Camp Fire in Paradise, California. And the Camp Fire, obviously, the whole town of Paradise is essentially gone. And many of you probably know people that live there. If you've seen any of the news coverage on it, you know how bad it was. And even before that, we had what was called the Carr Fire, which was in Redding, California, which actually got into the city of Redding and caused a lot of devastation and a lot of death and injuries. So my slide shows a little bit out of date now. Unfortunately, it's only going to get worse from here with what we're seeing around the state of California with our climate and with the warming and everything. The fire danger going forward is going to be pretty critical. And these are just some pictures from the Tubbs Fire in Santa Rosa. I posted the one in the lower right-hand corner, or as you're facing it. That was City of Santa Rosa's Fire Station 5. It was their newest fire station in their department, and it was gone on the night of the fire.
Oh my God.
So we're not immune either. And that's just some statistics on the Tubbs fire. At the time, it was the most devastating fire in California history, both monetarily, loss of life, loss of structures. And again, unfortunately, that's been surpassed by the campfire in Paradise. So, again, like with all the other ones we talked about, here's the laundry list of things to do before the fire. Know your evacuation plans. Know the ways to leave the area. If you're at all savvy with your local geography, know basically more than one way to get out. Gather your emergency supplies. Your 72-hour kit. We recommend having what are called N95 masks. Basically, they're paper filtration masks that can help basically filter out a lot of the crud that gets in the air from fires. Not just smoke, but also dust and ash and things like that. Designate a room that can be closed from the outside air. Close all doors and windows. Set up a portable air cleaner. Keep pollution levels low. Obviously, if you're sheltering in place, if you're not being evacuated, try to have areas in your house you know that you can basically protect yourself from the smoke and the other things that might be generated by the fire. Most people have some sort of a document safe or a fireproof case in their house for vital records, passports, birth certificates, social security cards. Obviously, to protect those. Protect your house in respect to making sure you have defensible space. Obviously, having trees cut back so they're not overhanging your house. Making sure that your firewood is not stacked immediately up against your house. One of the things that we do when we do a house, if we're on a strike team, we call a strike team, a group of fire engines that are at a wildland fire. One of the first things we have to do when we're protecting the structure is start basically making that house hardened by basically taking firewood and throwing it away from the house. We're taking all the combustible furniture and stuff, moving it away from the house. So if you prepare ahead of time and aren't storing your firewood right against the house and everything, you're helping us out a lot by doing that. See here.
So if you have a fence, would it be okay to stack it against that fence?
That's usually okay. I would just do it some distance away from the house if possible. And a lot of people, and keep in mind, these are best case scenarios. If you're limited by space and you don't really have any place good to store, to stash it or stack it rather, you've got to do what you got to do with the space that you have. But if you have any kind of a choice at all, try to locate it away from your house.
All right. And how often should your 72-hour kit be updated? So if
Great
you don't
question.
use it, you've got medications, you've got food maybe that's spoiled, would you say once a year?
I say once a year.
Okay.
I know with our 72-hour kit, not only do we do it once a year, but we'll actually do it now. Now that I'm ultra paranoid about abandoning my family and everything, we do a family emergency drill every year where we have expiring supplies. We'll basically say, and this is popular with the kids, put your phones away, it's disaster drill time, and we don't do TV, stuff like that. We live out of our 72-hour kit, and then we replenish our supplies that way. And so that way, we get familiar with everything that's in there, and we're used to using this stuff. There's some muscle memory built in. And so. Dads are always very popular during that time, but it's a realistic thing. So. So during the fire, obviously, if you're told to evacuate, please evacuate. Follow because if the firefighters are running that way, you should be running that way too. I'm kidding, we're not going to be running, but if you're trapped, which a lot of people that stay behind and they don't evacuate, if for some reason you get trapped, cut off, call 911, let them know your address, let them know where you're at, how many people you have with you, and basically let us know where you're at so we can get there and get to you. Listen to your different sources of media, radio, television if you still have it, social media. A lot of people have what are called NOAA radios. They're basically weather radios that activate in times of severe weather emergencies. Again, if you're needing to evacuate during a fire, consider the use of an N95 mask. And if you're not ordered to evacuate, but smoking conditions exist, stay inside or go to a safe location. Basically, a shelter in place, because that was one of the big things with the amount of fires we had in our area with the campfire burning over in Paradise. We were actually in our area here trying to get inundated with air quality problems. My daughter goes to school down at University of the Pacific in Stockton, and they actually had to close campus there because the smoke was so bad that they couldn't conduct class anymore. And it's so it's a real threat. So after the fire, again, listen to authorities and have them tell you when it's safe to go back into your area, obviously. Because not only do you not want to go in areas that are actively burning or causing, having issues, so there's like the power lines down, there's all kinds of other issues. There's also issues of, we just had this major fire that burnt plastics and all kinds of other, you have nasty chemicals that might have spilled. And there's also the issue of security. And believe it or not, as horrible as it sounds, one of the biggest problems they have in these burned areas is people going in and looting after the fire is over with. So make sure you have permission to be there.
Where would we get one of those N5 masks?
You can buy them at hardware stores. Yeah, basically it's called an N95, and I can give you information, but local hardware stores have them. Medical supply stores have them. Some people use them as medical masks to be able to protect themselves against fluid and whatnot. So, yes.
They're definitely at least, I have my husband get some of the fires and the smoke. I was really sensitive. So they're definitely there.
Excellent. Again, avoid hot ash, charred trees, damaged houses, whatnot, obviously for personal safety. Send text messages or use social media to reach out, contact family and friends. Phones, like we mentioned before, are not always reliable. Wear a respirator and N95 mask. Document property damage with photographs, if you have to be willing to do that. And also keep in mind, and we're seeing this now in Paradise, the rain rolled in as the fire to help with the fire out, but now they're experiencing flooding and landslides and mudslides and whatnot just because the ground's been so weakened. And all those trees and everything that burned away also used to help hold the soil in place, and that's all gone now. A couple more minutes, I swear, and I'll quit yelling at you.
It's very interesting.
So we're talking about 72-hour kits now. We've talked a little about this as we go on. Now keep in mind, these are just ideas that you should put in your kits. Obviously, your family's needs may vary, but some of the things you should be thinking about, obviously, is food and water for 3 days. Obviously, non-perishable food is the best. And water, 1 gallon of water per family member per day. That's a lot of water. But that's when you don't.
That's a lot of weight.
It is. It is a lot of
Talking
weight.
about mobility and backpacks and lifting.
Right.
And I've been backpacking, and what is your thought on carrying the pellets that will purify found water as opposed to carrying clarified water?
I don't have experience with those. I've never used those before. I know that a lot of places sell those, but I'm not sure. Again, I can't really give advice on that.
What do you use?
What do I use? I basically, like I said, in our go bags, our portable ones, we basically carry a couple canteens of large gallons of canteens that we all basically have to share. So we're actually underneath the limited amount there. We also have what's called a life straw. Have you guys ever heard of a life straw? A life straw is basically, it's a filtration straw that you can put in pretty much any body of water and use a straw. Not seawater, not salt water, obviously. It doesn't filter out salt, but it will if you put it in freshwater sources. You can draw water directly from them. And that's kind of a worst case scenario thing. Where we actually have the larger amounts of water is in our bigger kit in our garage. Obviously, it's not a portable one, but basically we store the water out there. We have basically one for all of our food supplies and other things, and one dedicated solely to water. So, but that obviously isn't a mobile one. That's a for sheltering in place. Yeah, it's very heavy. So our mobile kits are actually the canteens and things that are more reasonable to carry. Yes?
I always keep a 5-gallon jug of water in the back of my car, as well as a pallet or 2 of water bottles, house sealed in my car.
Okay.
That gives it more of a mobile. And I also have a 3-gallon and a 1-gallon jug, so I can go smaller, and a funnel to transport the water into each.
Okay.
So it's not.
Yeah.
I still have up to the water limit for my family, but it's in the cars, not in the garage, or you don't have the space. So it gives us an option.
Okay.
It's just hope the cars are compromised.
Yeah, of course.
So.
Does he another hand? Yes.
You're starting to hear a lot of criticism about how the public was not informed in Paradise and in Malibu ahead of time. How would you rate our information
Basically we have, with our notification systems we have here, right now, today, I would rate them actually pretty good, because the tests that I've been a part of, and I can only speak from personal experience, I'm sure there's been variable experiences for people out there, but for reverse 911, which is where they can use the 911 system to call people's houses back, and for the local alert Humboldt system, that basically if you sign up for it, if you sign up for it or you don't sign up for it, you basically get the alerts. I've gotten all the alerts when they've had a test. The only downside is the system hasn't really been tested by a real disaster, which is great, knock on wood. But again, right now today, I'd say the system works really well, but it hasn't been compromised or really tested by an event. So right now, I think it's working. I think it works just fine. But again, we'll see when the event actually happens.
Is there a public siren system? Like-
There is a tsunami alert system that basically every couple of months, I think every quarterly per year, they do test those. Actually, they'll put out a lot of media basically saying if you hear sirens, that's what it is. Basically, like old air raid sirens. But as far as for any other type of disasters, they don't have any like fire sirens or anything like that. It's basically specific to tsunamis.
But they could probably use those in case of an impending.
Potentially, yes, they
Tsunami
could.
areas. They're not everywhere, they're only tsunami areas.
Yes, ma'am.
Well, I think on these kits, if you're keeping one at home, like in your garage, I also think you should either have a tarp or a tent in case you're not able to be in your home to keep you out of the weather.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. That's actually a really good suggestion. And, because we do take it for granted that our house is going to be okay after an earthquake or something like that, but that may not be the case. And if you find yourself in an evacuation zone while they're waiting for the shelter to get set up, you could potentially need something like that. So I think that's a great suggestion. Other hands I saw? Yes.
I'm just going to say that besides the water straw, you can use a filter kit, and I've gone backpacking quite a bit, and that works real good. Also, the iodine tablets are good.
Okay.
They also give like a little warnings, like only if you really suspect the water, and a lot of times you have to suspect the water, unless it's like coming from like a spring or something. They say only use one, or if you really suspect it, use two. But watch out, because it is a little nasty. And one time I used it on an open wound, my hand, and it burned really bad.
Well, it's good to hear those. Like I said, I haven't had any experience with those, but having, someone that knows that has backpacked and used those things before, that's great information. So, anyways, go through them really quick. Obviously, flashlights and extra batteries. Equipment, can opener, dishes, shovel, a radio, assorted odds and ends like that. Personal supplies, medications, toiletries, personal documents and identification. You mentioned your aunt that had the kits, and she actually had everybody's identification and stuff in there.
That's why I started to follow after her.
Okay.
She
Yeah.
she only has family of 4.
Okay.
But she had 4 every time we visit her, those 4 red backpacks, they're bright red, they're right in her storage unit, that has every member of the family. And in there, like for her husband, he has contacts. However, he wears contacts. However, she put little glasses in there. She has, for herself, she likes lipstick, so she has a thing of lipstick in there, as well as for her emergency stuff. But her son, he's a diabetic, so there's emergency supplies in there. They rotate. They go through every month or so for vacation purposes, make sure it's all okay, and they do practice that, and they rotate their stuff twice a year.
Good.
Because they can't. So, they have, those kits are not just in one place in their house though. If that exit of their home is compromised, they have another set by another exit. And it's all over just in their homes. They have, each of the kids have them in their bedrooms, each of the adults have one in their bedrooms. They have, so if it's in the middle of the night, it doesn't matter. They're just kind of these little sections all over her house.
Good. Yeah, she sounds like she's got it dialed in. That's great.
And she has at least a 6-month to a 1-year food supply as well. So,
Yeah, that's great. And one other note on the kids, if you have pets, prepare for them as well, because they're part of the family too, and you got to take care of them.
There's been a lot of radio announcements on lately
Absolutely.
like that.
So,
But if you are not home, but your pets are, do you recommend having a sign on your house in case of emergency? So if you're not home and you have pets, say there's damage to your house, that would let somebody know if they're,
it's entirely up to you. The only problem is they used to teach basically, they used to see what was called a top finder sticker on houses, and basically people put that on their window basically saying that I have children inside, and they also would put pets on there. But the problem is then people would move, and a new family moves in, and they don't have children. And not only that, but especially for the children, the one for animals is really the call of the owner. And not sounding harsh, and I'm actually a dog lover. If we're still going through the assessment process and trying to find people, animals are going to be a lower priority for us to find them. But later on, if it's something we're coming back to, it might be nice to know if there's a pet there. I recommend against the ones saying the children are inside, not only because if people move, there's not kids inside anymore. It also marks your house for people that maybe don't need to know the kids are inside. So. Anyways, went through the last part pretty quick. I think I really went over time here, but here's my contact information. I'm going to hang out for a little while afterwards. If you have more questions or want to talk about anything else on this, feel free. I'm here as long as you guys need me to be. If you have another question that doesn't get answered today, or you have something else to add, please send me an email, give me a phone call. Don't hesitate, because I learn as much from doing these things from you guys as you guys do from me. So, thank you guys very much.
Thank you.